Morning. Happy Monday to everyone. This is my very first time using StreamYard and streaming live on Facebook. So, welcome to Legal Talk with Patricia Bryan, streaming live on Facebook. I thought it would be best to stream live on Facebook itself due to more followers being of Caymanian background on Facebook and then transferring it to the other platforms. So, what I want to talk about today is residency and employment rights, marriages of convenience, and talk to not only local indigenous generational Caymanians, but also to persons who have acquired Caymanian status and live and work on the island. So I wanted to start by saying that there has been some new changes, as everyone knows. I've talked about it before on other videos, and some of those changes I want to be more in depth about. I've thought about discussing this topic for quite some time, and I would go and come with the decision on whether or not to do so because it is a very sensitive topic. Our minister for Caymanian protection and immigration, our premier, and other MPs here and there have discussed this matter, but primarily the Department of Work and the Ministry of Caymanian Protection and Immigration. And so I recently had a few conversations just in the last 2.5 months, and where I have become aware of persons who have married and, already they're experiencing concerning situations, and marriages haven't even been 6 months yet. So I thought it would be best to have this conversation today. Now, some of the changes, I'll get to that right away. First, I'd probably best talk about some of my personal experiences in order to set the stage for people being aware that I understand about marriages of convenience and what is known as arrangements of convenience in the new law. And I have had the privilege to be in America for quite a number of years. I grew up in America as a child for a short time, and I returned to America a number of years ago to pursue my higher education. And during that time, one very important thing that I have learned is to try to share your personal experience to meet the public's understanding that you have an understanding of where some people might come from, or you've been there and done that, so you are a little experienced in these situations. And so one of the things I wanted to say, I was married to a non-Caymanian many years ago. My daughter is now 24. And I won't say which nationality he was from, but it's probably not the nationality that most people would think of right off the top of their head. However, the marriage did not last. In my younger days, some would say I'm still very young, I thought, as I'd had two children out of wedlock and a young single parent, I thought it best to marry my non-Caymanian partner. We had planned to get married in any case. It was not a marriage of convenience to me. However, we upped the time to be married due to me finding out I was pregnant. And so we married in a very short time. And within, I would say, about 3 months of that marriage, I finally came to the understanding and realization and defeat that the marriage was not in my best interest. It almost destroyed my professional reputation. It almost caused me to lose my job because of things that were done by my now ex-husband, and placed me in very compromising positions in my professional capacity and personal life. I was abused emotionally, psychologically, physically, um, publicly. And so I share that to say, had I not, I wouldn't say rushed to do what I did, thinking that I was doing the right thing by marrying someone that I realized we had an early pregnancy, unplanned pregnancy. And I thought I was doing the right thing. Let's marry and legitimate our marriage and pregnancy. And so that did not work out. But during the course of the time, I realized that this person really did not marry for the right intentions. I have a beautiful, beautiful daughter out of the marriage. I'm very proud of her. She has done well. All three of my children have done well professionally. And so there's no regret there. However, I use this experience to share with the public that we have, as Caymanians, to be very mindful when we intend to marry persons who are non-Caymanians. And again, I will say this is not only for our indigenous generational local Caymanians, this is also for persons who have acquired Caymanian status or permanent residency here in the Cayman Islands. It's just to have that name in the back of your name to say, I have permanent residence in the Cayman Islands, I'm a Caymanian, I have Caymanian status. And so we know, the governments for years have known that this has posed a problem. We are probably, next to the US and Canada and the UK, one of the most major countries that people seek to get married here, to stay in this country. And so I want to address my Caymanians. Take your time to get married. Take your time to know someone before you get married. If that person is already on island and have a work permit, there is definitely no need to rush. Definitely. You should be dating someone, trying to get to know someone for at least, say, a year and a half. If you don't know sufficient enough information about someone in a year and a half, then you can never know someone. Let's be clear on that. You can never know someone. But I feel, based on my experience and experience of friends and families and persons who share their stories and observations that I've made over the course of time, that a year is a substantial amount of time to get to know someone. A year and a half. That's 1 year and 6 months. I know we as a Christian nation and our church will tell us not to live with people, not to engage in extramarital sex and intimacy and that sort of thing before marriage. In today's world, we have to be realistic. We really have to be realistic. We have to be mindful of the decisions that we make. We have to protect ourselves. And we have to know that we need to get to know someone before we marry these people. This is a critical decision in your life. Marriage is not to be taken lightly. You simply cannot take it lightly. I had another experience about almost 2 years ago now where I dated another non-Caymanian from a different nationality. And I can tell you, this person, it was not hard to see that this person was clearly about getting married. Some of the things that this person said in the first 6 months, the first 2 months that we were dating, was, I'm not an opportunist. Now, if that person sees this video, they're going to know who they are. But some of the things this person said was, I'm not an opportunist. I'm not here to marry a Caymanian. I have my permit. However, there were always questions, especially questions such as coming home one day or coming over one day and saying, if we were to get married, would we need to sign a prenup? You know, if we were to get married, this, if we were to get married, that, you know, this person's parent, whenever there were disagreements or so forth, this person's parent would say, give it 1 year, give it some time. You know, I realize not in the guise of advice, parental advice, but more in the guise of there seemed to have been a strategic plan in place to eventually have a marriage put into place. There were times when that was said, when the person would say, I'm going to talk to my mommy. I can't deal with this anymore, as though the person was in a relationship and tried to remain in a relationship based on advice from the parent. And so what I want to say to Caymanians, and I will say this again throughout this video, not only my local, generational, and ancestral Caymanian people, but also persons who have acquired Caymanian status and who are permanent residents. Because you are able to pass those statuses on to your spouse. Now, we have persons who are Caymanian status holders and permanent resident holders, and they divorce Caymanians as soon as they acquire, and Caymanian status, and as soon as they acquire their permanent residence or Caymanian status, they then divorce the Caymanian or permanent resident holder. They will marry someone from their own country, and they will try to pass on those same rights. We have seen that the new immigration laws has cut that. That will no longer be possible the way that it used to be. Many of you are now aware of that. And so I share my personal experiences with you to let you know this is a real issue. The issue of persons coming here and marrying, specifically having children, specifically just to anchor themselves. It's called terminology, loosely it's called anchor babies. They have children here to anchor themselves into a relationship, into rights to stay on island. And children are often left at the mercy of these relationships, these marriages. Many times the mothers themselves are left to raise the children on their own, and the government will oftentimes have to step in to become wards or assist with these situations. This is something our new immigration reform has been put in place to try to combat. That last relationship that I just mentioned, I will be honest with you and tell you, because the best thing for people to understand is when they know you have been through it. So that last relationship that I dated, a non-Caymanian, approximately 2 years ago, that person on the 31st of December, 2025, saw me and tried to engage in conversation with me. Person told me they had been dating a few people over the time since we had, I had ended the relationship. And so that person had recently, according to that person, moved in with someone new. However, this person still wanted to recommence a relationship with me, and I nipped it in the bud. Needless to say, we would just leave it at that. And I can assure you, today is the 1st of June, and that person has already gotten married within the last 5 months. Had a baby previously while dating me, and then has gotten married in the last 5 months. I suppose realizing that we would not be getting back in any type of relationship. I show you people that you have to be diligent. You have to do your due diligence. You have to get, I may never have another non-immigrant want to date me. That's fine. Caymanians don't want to date me. And now non-immigrants don't want to go are probably not going to want to date me. Less of them think about marrying me, right? But that's absolutely fine. That's absolutely fine. So I say to you, Caymanians, permanent residents, you have to do your due diligence in getting to know someone. Spend time dating. Ask questions. Get to know their lifestyles, their backgrounds, their habits, their hobbies. You have to have some sort of compatibility. Their reputation affects your reputation. The friends that they have affects your reputation. If their families aren't on island, you have to meet their families. In the technological age, there's a lot of videoing. You can meet families by videos. You can spend time talking. Maybe this is a giveaway that some people are going to up their game in how they are going to, train themselves in order to pass the test for marriages or arrangements of conveniences. Nevertheless, that is on them. Our government is working very hard, just as the rest of the governments around the world, to try to combat these types of situations where their citizens and people are being married just for economic and situational purposes. And so I call upon every one of you to make sure you know what you are doing. Get to know families, talk to families, spend time with the person, date. And when I say date, not just date in a relationship, but do things together, see what you all have in common. Don't be in situations where you marry someone and in the first 3 to 6 months, it seems like a honeymoon period, and this is how it's always going to be. There are 4 stages to relationships. And the honeymoon period is the first stage, which usually lasts, scientifically, I have read online, usually lasts about 3 to 6 months. That's technically the honeymoon stage. And that's where all of the glamour and glitz and butterflies and everything goes on and make you feel like, I want to marry this person. The guy says the right thing, he does the right thing, he makes you feel so special. The woman will be, we won't even get into what the woman does, right? But anyway, take your time and get to know someone. Once that marriage or that civil union has been legally recognized in the eyes of the law and signed off, the true person generally comes out. I'm not calling on any one nationality here. There's over 100 and something different nationalities in the Cayman Islands. And many of our people have gone through these types of situations with many of these nationalities. There are some nationalities that are more prevalent. They do it more often than others. I swear sometimes they have training where they come from in order to come to the Cayman Islands and get someone to marry while they have someone back in their own country. They have children that they hide. I know of one lady who was married here for 30 something years and had 2 grown Caymanian children. And she had a daughter that the Caymanian husband did not find out about until when the daughter, the Caymanian child of him and his wife, passed away. And he discovered that it was over 30 something years that his wife from another country, I hope I didn't just say which country it was from, but anyway, his wife from the other country had a daughter, a grown daughter that he had never known about. So we will never find out everything about someone, but we need to try. We need to know their religious preferences, what they prefer to eat. And we need to know things. When I was in the US, I specialize in immigration in my studies in the US. I studied legal legal studies, and I specialized in immigration. And one thing that I worked at two immigration law firms, and in my studies, one thing that we engaged in was both sides of the coin and preparing persons for immigration interviews through marriages and permanent residence, but also mock courts, immigration courts, where we had to pretend as though we were into overseeing marriages of convenience or suspected marriages of convenience. And so I am quite aware what it takes. In the US, they do interviews. I'm not quite sure if Cayman do interviews here, but I've heard that they do. In the US, they do interviews. When they are considering the paperwork for the non-US citizen, there's interviews and they ask you some of everything. Let me tell you, they ask you some of everything, what side of the bed your spouse likes to sleep on, all kinds of questions. So if you don't know, that's a red flag. If you don't know what your spouse had for breakfast, if you don't know which bank they banks at, if you and them don't have a car together, if you don't know what type of toothpaste they use, if you don't know how much they last spent, if you don't know what their favorite color is, if you've never met their mom or their dad, or you don't know if their mom or dad has passed away, how much brothers and sisters they have, if you and them don't have receipts that you've gone out for dinner, that you went to the movies, you know, if they've never bought you anything that you can prove they've bought you something. I mean, the list goes on. Having a child does not show the immigration that you have a bona fide relationship. Social media these days are not showing immigration that you have a bona fide relationship. In the States, you have to have receipts of a long duration of time. You have to get statements from people who knows, sworn statements from people who knows you've been in a long-term relationship, not just, oh, we met 3 months ago. Now, no one can tell you how long it takes for you to get married. No one can determine when you should get married. The law should not dictate to people. However, the laws of the country have a right, a legal and humanitarian right, to put laws in place to protect its people from being taken advantage of and from persons coming to the country for predatory purposes and to take advantage of its people. And so that's what the new Cayman Islands government has done. We want to give them commendations and recommendations. I understand some of these immigration arrangements began with the last administration, and I'm sure it's been slowly trickling from administration to administration, but this administration finally had the courage to do so. Every MP campaigned on immigration reform, and this immigration finally took the bulls by the horn. The Minister for Caymanian Protection, see, they even renamed the entire ministry. Ministry for Caymanian Protection and Immigration. So it shows you how serious they are about immigration and arrangements of conveniences and marriages of conveniences. Caymanians, you need to stand for yourself. We have to take accountability and responsibility when we engage in marriages too soon, and then we expect the law to take everything in control and protect us when we are the ones that are supposed to protect us from the beginning. Protect ourselves. I realize now that there's also a new act talks about marriage officers. Anyone who can perform a marriage in the Cayman Islands have a right. It's not new, but they've made a bit of reform to it, that anyone who can oversee a marriage and sign off on a marriage officer, they're called, has a right to report a suspicion of marriage of convenience or arrangements of convenience. And they have specifically put an amendment together just for this. They've specifically given a new template of what these marriage officers have to use in order to report arrangements of conveniences, is what they're called. So new persons that are recently married, I had someone that I know messaged and said, I recently got married. It's about 3 months, and already my marriage is falling apart. Now, I believe they may not have known each other long enough. They may have felt, I want to keep this person here on island. I love this person. Some of you may never have even traveled to your spouse's destination or your fiance or anything like that. You've never traveled to see where they come from, where they live, their backgrounds, if they're telling the truth. Nothing. You know, some of you can't afford it. Even after you get married, you can't afford to travel to their country. So you have to be careful and make sure you know what you're doing. Yes, I know this video is going to give some people ammunition of what to do, step up their games, but Caymanians and permanent resident holders, including Caymanian status holders, you have to be vigilant. You have to pay attention. If you pay enough attention, you know if something is real or isn't real. You can feel it, you can sense it. Some of these people are so, I'm not only saying men or women, I'm talking both sexes of immigrants who come to the island. And it's a variety of nationalities, I want to say again. We do know there are some nationalities that are well known for doing these things, but we're not going to just stick it to 1 or 2 or 3 nationalities. It is across the board. Okay, so I'm going to get in now again to the residency and employment rights changes. I am reading from the Immigration Reform Guidebook because it is easier for me to read the breakdown that the government has been prepared and to put it to you, the public that's watching and listening and following and liking and sharing this video. When you repeat what you've seen on my video, you will say, she's reading from what the government has been prepared. I may throw my own little, what I would say, clarification in there so I can make some things clearer to some of you, but I am reading so the government doesn't say I'm saying what's not right. So the revised acts also make substantial changes to residency and employment rights certificates, especially where the certificate is linked to marriage. Civil partnership generally means between 2 persons that are from the same sex. I will use the word respectfully and say gay civil relationships because gay marriages are generally, as far as I am aware, is not recognized in the Cayman Islands as yet. So they put in place civil partnerships in order to recognize that 2 people of the same sex has a partnership, and it is a legal partnership for all intents and purposes under the law. And also, this law has made substantial changes where it concerns Caymanian children. Okay? So longer path for nationalities. Some RERC holders must now wait longer before applying for naturalization. Okay? This applies to persons holding an RERC as a spouse or civil partner of a permanent resident, persons holding an RERC as a spouse or civil partner of a Caymanian. In both cases, the previous position allowed the person to apply for naturalization after 1 year. The updated act increases that period to 15 years. So if you are a non-Caymanian and you've acquired RERC, you have a longer path before you can apply for naturalization. You now have to wait 15 years. Okay? Greater scrutiny of marriages and civil partnerships. The Act also allows the Director of Work or the board to consider whether there are reasonable grounds to suspect that the marriage or civil partnership is one of convenience. Now, it's important to note here, some people, you would not believe this, some people engage in civil partnerships in order to get their RERC, their Caymanian status, and their permanent residence, meaning they might not be interested in someone of the same sex as them, So a woman may not necessarily be gay with another woman, or a man may not necessarily be gay with another man, but they pretend as though they are in order to have rights to be on island, to receive an RERC, eventually permanent residence, and or Caymanian status. Okay, so the act allows the director of work or the board to consider whether there's reasonable grounds, whether they have things to consider, to look at, to consider whether is this a legitimate civil partnership? Is this a legitimate marriage? Or let's look into this a little bit more. Authorities may consider whether the relationship is genuine for immigration purposes. The new structure distinguishes between marriages of different lengths. This is important. If the marriage existed for less than 7 years, under this new law, which came into effect on May 1st, 2026, if the marriage existed for less than 7 years before you put in your application for RERC, if the marriage existed for less than 7 years before the death of a Caymanian spouse, the surviving spouse loses their RERC. If the marriages existed for at least 7 years, but less than 15 years, continuation may depend on the discretion of the board or the director of work. The surviving spouse must apply within 6 months after the death of the Caymanian spouse for the right to continue to hold the certificate. Where revocation occurs, the surviving spouse must apply within 3 months of revocation to maintain the facility. That means maintain the certificate of RERC. So if you get married and you've applied for RERC and your spouse dies before 7 years, the surviving spouse loses the RERC if you acquire it. If you haven't been married for at least 15 years, the director or the board have the discretion to consider whether to let you continue having that certificate. If you are the surviving spouse of a deceased Caymanian, you must apply within 6 months after the death of the Caymanian for the right to continue to hold the certificate. Where the revocation occurs, the surviving spouse must apply within 3 months of revocation to maintain. So if the revocation has already started, you must apply within 3 months. Or if it has already happened, you must apply within 3 months after to try to regain back the certificate and the rights. The Act also provides that the person's rights may continue on the same terms while the application or any appeal is being decided. Continuation of RERC after divorce, dissolution, or annulment. That means the marriage no longer exists. Annulment means you can go to court and ask the court to consider the marriage as having never existed. And that is usually done on the grounds of when someone has, what is the word I'm looking for? Annulments are usually only granted in special circumstances where it can be proven that the marriage was a marriage of a sham marriage, inconvenience. There were the one or other of the spouse was not being fair, not doing the right thing, was misleading. I'm struggling to find the right word to describe this now, but you all get the picture. So continuation after divorce, dissolution, or annulment, the revised act gives the board or the director of work discretion to revoke an RERC where the marriage or civil partnership has dissolved or been annulled and had lasted for at least 7 years, but less than 15 years at the time of dissolution or annulment. This makes clear that revocation is not automatic. Now, an application for RERC based on Caymanian children. We see President Trump in the United States right now has been trying to overthrow the decades-old laws of the United States that says if a child is born in the United States, it is considered a U.S. citizen, born U.S. citizen. If it's born in U.S. territory, it's considered a U.S. citizen. If it's born in U.S. airspace or U.S. sea space or whatever they call that, it's considered, the child is considered a U.S. citizen. And so that is what I have heard has been happening in the Cayman Islands. We have persons coming here to work. They come here and they say they're not pregnant, but when they get here, they start showing. Some people come here and they intentionally and deliberately. I think what WRC has to do now is have people swear affidavits that they're not going to get pregnant while they're here on work permits. They have to show pregnancy tests that they're not pregnant before they enter the jurisdiction, because that's what the US is going to be requiring, I understand. They have to show that they can travel, they're fit to travel up to a certain term of their pregnancies. Because people are coming here, not realizing too that sometimes, even if you have a child in the Cayman Islands, they're not going to get Caymanian citizenship because of being born here. It depends on the year they're born and so forth and whatnot. A lot of people don't realize that there's a lot of behind the scene things that goes in, but we see that a lot of nationalities here, even in 3-month work permits, are getting pregnant. They're having children just to have some sort of connection. Not only persons that are trying to marry to Caymanians for marriages of convenience and arrangements of convenience. We see people that come here as a family, a husband and a wife, and they get work permits, and some of them bring their other children here, and some of them have children here while they're here, intentionally and deliberately. And so this is one thing I believe the law is trying to cut down. And so a detailed set of changes applies where a person seeks continuation of an RERC on the basis that they have Caymanian children. The law now requires more than just proof that the child exists. The applicant may need to show that they have financially supported the child, continue to contribute positively to the child's life. Pause there. I have been a strong advocate for legislative changes, and I did succeed in having some changes made back in 2004, 2005, through a motion supplied to the House. And those changes covered some of this. It entailed any child that was in the Cayman Islands. I have written a small book about child support and maintenance of children. And this particular area is one of the primary concerns that was in my advocacy. Persons having children with Caymanians or permanent resident holders, and only afterwards, children are no longer on their radar to care for and maintain. I am glad that this government has, another thing I had advocated for many years ago is for departments to communicate with one another in order to have the proof, especially with immigration and the judicial system and pension and Department of Labor. DCI, Minister Miles, has said it more than once that there are now 16 departments and agencies of government that communicate with each other. So people, you cannot hide. Immigration will be issuing these IDs with any new work permits coming on. These IDs will also be a part of being able to monitor what people are doing in these islands that have children that are for non-Caymanians. You cannot have children in these islands and then or jump in a marriage and then you run around and play around and forget about your family. The children are not responsible and they need to be taken care of. I, on the other hand, I know a lot better. Thank goodness I don't have to go through that at this time, but I have been through that. I have been through having a child for a non-Caymanian, and that person, through the goodness of my heart, supported that person remaining on island at that time. We all know one word in immigration was sending the non-Caymanian parent back to where they came from because they were just being nuisances and rogues and vagabonds and not conducting themselves in the best interest of being in the Cayman Islands. That may no longer be the case here, but whereas I put the best interest of my child at the forefront, that other parent did not. And so I took the initiative to take advantage of the resources available to me, and that was through the court system. It is there for every single parent in this island. If you have parental visitation, if you're having problems with parental visitation, if you're having problems with maintenance and child support, the courts, the family courts is there, ready and willing and able. Social services is there, ready and willing and able. MASH is there, ready and willing and able to assist and come collectively together to help solve these family issues. You can go and both parents, either parents, petition the court to have these matters before the courts for the courts to put orders in place, and there won't be any problems. If you can't do it on your own as two responsible, mature parents. I was a responsible, mature parent. My other child's parent was not. So I leave that there with you guys. If they cannot provide the sufficient proof, the director of work or the board may request a social inquiry report from the Department of Children and Family Services or the Department of Community Rehabilitation. And the law also clarifies that the Caymanian child must be the child of both parties to the marriage or civil partnership being relied upon. So the child must belong to both parties. The Caymanian child or the child that's being claimed as Caymanian. Now, again, I want to say not every child born in the Cayman Islands can be considered a Caymanian child. I've had some questions and some other posts of whether their child is considered a Caymanian or not, and especially if you're not married. You know, so those are questions for you to take to WORC. The email is worc@gov.ky for your questions. worc@gmail.ky. You can put in the subject line what your question is going to be or what you're concerned about, and you send your email to them. For persons overseas and off island, that is the easiest way for you to do. I have been trying to advocate for these departments to get a WhatsApp number because many of you don't have credit or you're off island and you don't have the resources to call international back to the Cayman Islands. But at this time, even with an 800 number, some of you that are overseas cannot still call back to the Cayman Islands. So I have still been advocating and hoping the government is listening and that they will try to put together some WhatsApp numbers that will be managed and monitored for persons to be able to WhatsApp the department. Okay. A person with RERC through a Caymanian relationship cannot extend that status to a new non-Caymanian spouse or civil partner after the original relationships end. I talked about that a few minutes ago. The revised act also includes the requirements for the applicant to provide confirmation that they are of good character and good health. And so good character also means that the department can also now communicate with RCIPS or any other department to see whether somebody's name comes up flagged for any reason. And your social medias too, people have to be clean. Blocking it is not going to help you. You have to conduct yourself in the most responsible person of good character. You don't get online saying you're a parent of a Caymanian child and you're cussing the Caymanian government, you're cussing the Caymanian people. Yes, you have the right to say whatever you want to say on your social media. That is your page. But also remember, governments are monitoring these social medias worldwide. It's not just the Cayman Islands government. The president of the United States, the most powerful, supposedly the most powerful country in the world, has said all applications now have to put their social media handles, their social media identities. And if they're closed, you will more than likely be refused for whatever application you put down. It's not just going to be, oh, I can qualify because I'm a Caymanian or I'm Caymanian descent, I mean, US descent, or I have a US mother or father or whatever. Everything is collectively considered. And that's what the Cayman Islands government has to do here. You cannot be showing that you're out partying and then going on the latest boat cruise and going to Vibes Cartel, $250 ticket concert. I heard it was $250. And your child doesn't have enough. You have a case in court where you're behind on maintenance or you're being taken to court for maintenance. Your wages are garnished. I hope the courts are still garnishing wages. They're still putting orders against wages. One of the things I advocated for was that was already in place. But one of the things I advocated for was confiscating their private assets, blocking their bank accounts, blocking their driver's license applications, their passport applications, their naturalization applications, everything. If a case is in maintenance court and you're not financially or emotionally taking care of your child, you should have nothing else besides a job and a place to live. Because whatever else you have, if you want a driver's license, you want to be able to register a car, take care of your child. Yes, you have to get to work in order to make money to take care of your child. But if you're not taking care of your child, 6 of one, half a dozen of the other. The government of the Cayman Islands is not playing. You don't just come to the Cayman Islands and have a child and think you're just going to be here and play football. It just does not work. Okay, so moving on. I'm going to tell you again, I did it in another video, but I'm going to tell you some of the departments that are going to be sharing information, including the Royal Cayman Islands Police, Department of Labor and Pensions, Customs and Border Control, General Registry. This is where births and deaths and so forth are registered. The Department of Public Prosecutions. Those are the departments that's responsible for bringing up criminal charges against persons. The Department of Children and Family Services, we all know what they do. Social Services, it used to be called. The Department of Community Rehabilitation, who helps families in their family issues also. The Department of Financial Assistance used to be NAU, is now DFA. The Health Insurance Commission, portfolio of civil servants. Many of you have health insurance too, and your children don't have health insurance, and you have some of the best health insurance. This is not about low income immigrants or families or working class families. This is also about some of you that make thousands of dollars and you send it home to your countries, over 100 different countries, and you're sending the money home to your countries, and children and marriage, your spouse is here and they're not getting the benefit of saying you're married or in a civil union, or you have permanent residence, or you have a Caymanian child. The portfolio of civil service, because it needs to be done. The Department of Commerce and Investment, DCI, which issues business license and so forth and whatnot, also is responsible for nonprofit organizations, because some of you form those and pretend like you're hiding the money, you know? And what the government also needs to do, for those of you who say you don't have a job and you're here on a work permit or you're in a marriage, is give back those forms in family court where you can show that you went out looking for a job, and bring that back to family court. The department responsible for scholarship administration, the unit responsible for national training and development, because many of you take advantage of that too. Caymanians and non-Caymanians alike that are married to Caymanians. And there are other departments here. Okay. Uh, this area talks about the annual declarations that need to be done. False financial information. There's a section that covers if you give false financial information, pretending like you're not working or you're only making this amount and that sort of thing. That's why we have the pension and labor office. Civil servants. This information can be found through the civil service. Pension and labor information can be found of how much you're making and how much is going towards your